The Cleveland Browns look to go 2-0 for the first time since 1993. But in order to do that, they are going to have to go to Pittsburgh and win on Monday Night Football against the Steelers. The Browns are favored, first time in Pittsburgh in 37 years. We're going to break it all down now on Crossover Thursday, joined by Locked On Steelers host Chris Carter.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Podcast Network. On Crossover Thursday, you know what it is. We start previewing these matchups for the upcoming NFL weekend. And this week, Steelers-Browns, old school rivalry. Story as old as time, and it's a big one in this episode coming up here. Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers, Jeff Lloyd from Locked On Browns. We have a lot to break down in this upcoming matchup. But first, before we do any of that, we want to remind you this show is sponsored by Prize Picks on Crossover Thursdays. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Jeff, my man, there's a lot of excitement in Cleveland. They laid the smackdown on the Cincinnati Bengals last week. They're 1-0, and there's a lot of historical implications if they're able to beat the Steelers on Monday night. Can you tell us all the things that play into this?
Well, I mean, as you and I were just discussing, if the Browns were able to go 2-0, it'd be the first time they've gone 2-0 since 1993. I believe young Christopher Carter was 3 years old at the time. I was still lacing them up, for God's sakes. I was still playing college ball in 93, and those years are far, far removed. Also, Cleveland Browns are going in here, as of right now, favored. First time the Cleveland Browns have been favored to play in Pittsburgh in 37 years, which puts me even further back, obviously, than 93. I believe on your standpoint, Chris, I believe it's 20 straight Monday Night Football games at home that the Pittsburgh Steelers have.
20 straight years of Monday Night Football.
20, so 2 decades worth.
Yes.
So, I mean, a lot of, if you like the numbers, you like the math, and I'm sure for some of you, you're going to run off to go place a bet for one of those one way or another. But it's been a really, really strong couple of days here for this franchise. One of my only really concerns Sunday was you think there's so much newness on this defense. And it's like, well, it takes time. And, it's usually the case. It didn't take any time. In one play, you saw the potential of what this defense could bring. Darius Smith got a big hit on Joe Burrow. I'm still convinced. I think he got some part of Joe Burrow's hand because Joe Burrow just never looked right in that game. And at points, it was almost rubbing the top of his hand. I know that, the weather, that maybe he's got a glove. I mean, you don't rub the top of your hand if you're trying to get your hand wet. You're not throwing the football with the top of your hand. So, and Joe just, it looked labored. Obviously, it was a wet field. So if you got a bad calf, you got to be careful. You don't want to end up like Aaron Rodgers did on Monday Night Football, obviously. But the Browns just had the number. And the thing for me, and we tried to talk about it last week, was the Browns' defensive line, when it was Myles Garrett and basically the Garrettettes, a whole bunch of guys that nobody ever really knew of, weren't really great players. They always played well against Cincinnati Bengals. So now when the Browns came here, and now it's not Myles Garrett anymore. You can talk for 5 minutes about the Browns defensive line and not even get to Myles Garrett because you can talk about Darius Smith. You can talk about Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, Ogbonnia Okoronkwo, all of these guys. But the collective group that they put together, and you have Jim Schwartz with this theory of, well, if the quarterback never throws the ball, what coverage we ran doesn't matter. None of this. I mean, none of it matters. If the quarterback doesn't throw the ball, because they always say, when you throw the ball, only, 2 good things can happen. Well, if he doesn't throw it defensively, you're set. You're taken care of. And, and also keep in mind, one of the biggest acquisitions for the Cleveland Browns this offseason didn't play. Juan Thornhill did not play. Grant Delpit was out there, had one of the best safety performances I've seen from a Cleveland Browns safety since 2018. He had a downfield pass breakup on Higgins. He had a big hit on Joe Burrow on a blitz, stopping guys short of the sticks. He was phenomenal all afternoon. He was the highest graded player on defense. But this unit is good. Obviously, offense. And the biggest 2 takeaways I had was defensively, it's not going to be that easy every week. And offensively, you still won a game in convincing fashion. And a lot of people would say it was maybe a C+ effort, a B- effort from the offense because they left a lot of meat on the bone.
Certainly. I looked back and I was just surprised at Deshaun Watson, the way he threw the interception to Hill. I was just like, what?
It was in his defense. It was tipped. The ball was tipped. You didn't see it in the way it was because and it was weird because I think the defensive guy who actually tipped the ball, he'd already committed to Deshaun running. So basically, he almost got a hand on it, kind of more like a secondary player or a linebacker would. The original, the way it looked, it was like, oh, good God. He was wide open, but he's not our guy.
No, I got you. That was a bizarre situation, but even so, you just thought that there were times that Deshaun Watson just looked off key, but that with his work ethic, he's going to eventually find something that works in his favor. On the flip side, the Steelers are trying to atone for a complete drubbing at the hands of the San Francisco 49ers. There was a lot of confidence heading into week one, and that confidence was quickly shot down. Kenny Pickett talked a lot about it, and as far as what they needed to do, they needed to start faster. The defensive front, they took a lot of injuries. I think that's one of the bigger storylines in Pittsburgh right now. Cam Heyward is out for at least 8 weeks, which that's a huge hit to the defense. It's now the second year in a row that an all-pro player has been gone after week one. And now Dionte Johnson, the team's number one receiver, he's out for up to 4 weeks. So the Steelers are going to have to find answers really quickly. And in 2 areas that I think the Browns are very proficient in, and I want to get to the secondary part of that when it comes to the Cleveland's cornerbacks. But I got to lead off with the Browns offensive line. The Niners were able to run the ball consistently with Christian McCaffrey, and Nick Chubb is, if not the best, one of the best running backs in the NFL. I know that the Browns are going to be missing Jack Conklin, but that leads up to the guy behind him who they drafted, Dionte Johnson, aka Big Thanos, being in there for this game. And a lot of this is going to come down to who can run the ball better, or if Cleveland can run the ball consistently, because that sets up everything else they want to do on offense.
It was really funny the way the summer worked out, because once it wrapped up, one of the biggest storylines of the summer was, wow, Dionte Johnson is really, really good. But the Browns, there's nothing you can do with him. You can only play. It's not like defensive line where you can say, hey, I'll play 6 if I want to. You can only play 5. And obviously they committed the money to Conklin. There's the old line in sports that, sometimes these things have a way of working themselves out. Sadly, Jack Conklin suffers another major injury. But the Browns had him, and they had him ready to roll. Dionte Johnson, through the preseason and through week one, is grading, according to PFF, as an over 85 as a pass blocker. This is a 4th round rookie. You're not supposed to have a guy like that. But, should he have gone in the 4th round? Probably not. One word was he was probably a right tackle. They always get devalued in the draft process. The other one is he went down to Mobile practice one day, and his camp was like, you know what, we did enough. We're going to get out of here. So that certainly did not help either. But the Browns knew they had something special. The run blocking is still a work in progress. But I think part of that is going to be from him. Keep in mind, in the summer, he played with 2nd team. He played with 3rd team. So he's out there in his first, and this is now, this is all the top shelf talent. You know what I'm saying? And oh, wow, man, I got to move quicker, because otherwise I'm going to be in Nick Chubb's way, and this isn't really going to work out. But you want, obviously, to say the young man needs improvement in some aspect. But it's not like he can't do it. And it's not like he's not big enough or physical enough to get it done. But it's something that's going to be working on. But, hey, we saw a Browns right tackle debut on Monday Night Football in Pittsburgh 2 years ago. And James Hudson didn't work out very well that night.
Certainly. But I think on the flip side of this, while you're going to have Jones there, you're also going to have a new guy on the Steelers defensive front, and that's rookie Keanu Benton, who will be coming up on the defensive line. We talked to him in the Steelers locker room this past week, and he's ready to go. I thought, honestly, of all the defensive linemen the Steelers had, I thought he actually performed the best against the San Francisco 49ers. And now we know that DeMarvin Leal will be able to play in this game. He's the guy, a second-year player that they brought in last year. I thought he did very well last year for a rookie. I thought that he's taken some good steps in training camp, but now they're going to need these guys to really step up, because now all you have is Ogunjobi, who will play, but he's still not 100%. Whatever injuries that continues to ail him. But the worry here, Jeff, was that you had Cam Heyward out, DeMarvin Leal got hurt. You didn't know the status of Larry Ogunjobi, and so then you were all of a sudden looking like, oh boy, it's looking like maybe you might have complete backups playing your defensive line. It won't be that bad, but still, depth will be an issue for the Steelers on the defensive line, and that could be a major advantage for the Browns if they wanted to get their run game going. I want to talk with Jeff more specifically about the big Thanos versus TJ Watt matchup that's coming, because that specifically, beyond just the run game, could be huge for protecting Deshaun Watson. Last year, when Deshaun Watson played the Steelers for the first time, he got sacked 7 times. The Browns can't afford to let that happen again. We'll talk about what needs to happen and what could happen in this matchup in just a minute here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter, Jeff Lloyd from Locked On Steelers and Locked On Browns breaking it down for you. But first, I want to remind you, this show is sponsored by Jase Medical. And now with Jase Medical, you can get what's called the Jase case. And the Jase case provides you 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jase case is fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of their board-certified physicians. And then you can get ongoing care from physicians on any treatment-related questions. These are doctor-created and doctor-recommended. Don't be caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Jase handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Jase Medical is simple. You just go online, fill out a form, and then you get the prescription life-saving medications right to your door. The Jase case gives you peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using our code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On, all capital letters, all one word, at checkout when you go to jasemedical.com. And that's JASE Medical.com, JASE Medical.com to get your Jase case today. Back here on Crossover Thursday, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, Chris Carter, Jeff Lloyd, breaking down Steelers versus Browns here. Jeff, let's get right into one of the bigger matchups on the front, and that's going to be Dionte Jones, a.k.a. Big Thanos, versus TJ Watt. Dionte Jones having a pretty good premiere last week. He looked pretty solid in the reps that I was able to watch on the All-22 from that game. But who also had, maybe the only Steeler who could claim they had a really good week last week was TJ Watt, who sacked Brock Purdy 3 times, forced a fumble, and recovered a fumble. Jeff, the Browns are no stranger to how strong TJ Watt can be in this game. Do you foresee the Browns having that much confidence in Jones to be able to handle TJ Watt, or do you see them saying, "Hey, Njoku, get over there, Chubb, get over whoever is available, get an extra body on Watt because you don't want to leave the rookie up against that guy"?
Well, you're going to have plan A and you're going to have plan B. Obviously, plan A is you hope, and I think the Browns think he's going to go out there. And I'm not saying TJ Watt's not going to get his, because TJ Watt gets his every week. But I think the Browns think, he should go out there and, hold himself admirably. But there is still, it's the bright lights. It's the big, it's Monday Night Football. It's your first career start. It is TJ Watt. He wouldn't be the first guy to, maybe get a little starstruck, get a little nervous, and, maybe not give his best effort in a debut of the proportions like that. But yes, you do have plan B. And plan B would start with, well, if we're running it, we're just going to run left. And if we're going to throw passes, they're going to be short, they're going to be quick, and they're going to be over the middle, or they're going to be to the left. But he did get a good test against, and look, Nolan Smith from the Eagles, I'm not going to say because obviously with the 3-4 versus the 4-3, your outside rushers are a little bit different. And obviously TJ, as much as he is strong, he is really, really good athletically as well. But he did get, now I'm talking obviously sure about Dionte Jones, he did get a lot of reps against Nolan Smith, the Philadelphia Eagles #1 pick. Mm-hmm. And when you're the smaller guy in this scenario, basically you want to create contact first. You want to get some sort of pop in, just so basically, it's like the big fella, because then you got to use every drop of quickness, hopefully you can, to get around him. And keep in mind, there is a factor there. You have to still get around a guy who is 6'8", 360
Absolutely.
pounds. It takes a little bit of time to do that, obviously. So we'll see. But he progressed so well in every week of the preseason. And of course, there was no foreseeing it. Oh my God, Conklin's down. We all knew it was bad. We all knew it was most likely season ending immediately. And all of a sudden, there it is. He's in there. But as they said during the broadcast, what's the best thing you can hear about a scenario like that? Nobody ever talked about it. Which means he wasn't getting beat. He wasn't committing penalties.
Right.
So, and look, to say a guy, was a starting tackle at a place like Ohio State, yeah, you should easily transition, as far walking into the NFL and being ready to contribute. You facing LFL talent every single practice you face when you go to you're to school like Ohio State. But it's still to be the proven. But the Browns do also have the one advantage of normally when the Browns have to pay the Steelers, you've got to make sure you've got Heyward and you got to make sure you got Watt. Now basically you can say, well, look, we can basically say we got to make sure it's 90 that we are taking care of first. And the rest of their offensive line is still a really, really good unit. Keanu Benton, was a guy I was really, really excited about, for the draft process. Of course, he ends up in Pittsburgh because every guy I like the Browns don't take, they end up in the AFC North somehow, some way. But for the Browns, it's still tough that, because Jack Conklin was a proven commodity for them, but it does help them from a little bit of saying, hey, if we have to afford help, we think we can, because normally we have to help with Watt and we have to help with Heyward. Hopefully now we only have to apply some assistance, chipping, backs, tight end, be that who as it may, to obviously TJ Watt.
Absolutely. And for the record, on Pro Football Focus, they chart him with 20 plays in pass protection. 0 times did DeJuan Jones give up pressure. And I believe he lined up with Trey Hendrickson a couple times in that matchup.
Sam Hubbard as well.
Yeah. So some impressive reps there that we got to see from him. But let's move on to another matchup I think will be key, and that's this Browns secondary, because the Steelers will be without Dionte Johnson. They still have George Pickett. They added Allen Robinson in the offseason. They finally are getting to see Calvin Austin. I thought that he actually looked pretty decent in his first NFL game. He missed all last season with an injury, but he was a speedster from Memphis that they're excited to add to the picture here. And you got Pat Freiermuth. They've added Darnell Washington. They have that stuff there. But this is going to be a group now that locks up with a really good secondary. And this is something that I told you years ago. I liked it when I loved the addition of Denzel Ward. Greg Newsome's been really good. And those two specifically were really staunch in their coverage. And in fact, I asked Mike Tomlin about Grant Delpit, because as you brought up, he had a great game against the Bengals. And Mike Tomlin went from talking about Grant Delpit right to talking about those corners. Here was Mike Tomlin, Steelers head coach, in the Tuesday press conference at the Steelers facility talking about the secondary.
What about the Browns secondary impresses you so far, just what you've seen? You know about Ward and Newsome, but Delpit was a big factor in their win over Cincinnati last week as well.
Taking nothing away from Delpit, and McLeod, I think, played a lot because Thornhill was unavailable. They all played really well. But I thought if you wanted to summarize the game in a small number of words, their corner ability to stand up and man-to-man on the line of scrimmage versus Cincinnati's receivers was the story of the game on either side of the ball.
So, Jeff, there you have it. Mike Tomlin giving praise. And Mike Tomlin, he respects a lot of people's games. But when I look back at that game, he's absolutely right. You look at the way the corners are able to play. For Jim Schwartz's system to work, you have to have corners you can rely upon, because if he's sending the house the way that he does in his defense, and that's been his defense for however many years he's been coaching, it's been decades. But if he's sending the house, he needs corners that can lock it down. And there was very few times where Joe Burrow just had wide open guys to just target all over the field. And much credit to those Browns cornerbacks.
They're a nice, diverse group. I mean, they're really, really talented. I think that one of the biggest matchups we're probably going to see is I think Pickens, and it's going to be MJ Emerson. And here's a guy, and he played really well Sunday. But the thing is Chris, we do these shows. They got to be like 28 minutes or less. I can't give 5 minutes to everybody who had a good game on Sunday. It just doesn't work that way. Ross Jackson will be all over us. But he's nice. He's the number one to draw is the bigger assignment. He's here for T. Higgins. He's obviously here to cover against a guy like Pickens. Newsome, you would think, is going to probably be on the inside again this week, obviously with Austin. Certainly Denzel Ward, knows Allen Robinson. But they relish in it. And the thing is when you have a unit, and now where they're a lot deeper talented wise, it's that everybody wants everybody else to succeed, but also every guy, it's like, all right, well, he got his. I want to go get mine. Where's my play? Where's my PBU? Where's my interception? Where's my sack? And it fuels everybody. What I'm saying? Greatness, basically grows on greatness. Everybody sees somebody exceed. They want to. It's going to make that work that much harder too. So it's fun. I mean, for me, I still people forget that this team has Juan Thornhill and, a guy who can actually go attack balls. Browns have never had a free safety like that. And you saw it in the Kansas City preseason finale with Thornhill. So it's been a really, really fun group. But the biggest and most important thing is whatever communication there is, these guys are so into it and so motivated. it's getting done quickly, not lapses like last year where these guys just trust each other. They trust the system. They certainly trust Jim Schwartz. And having that week 1 performance, if there wasn't anybody who was sure about Jim Schwartz yet, that's over with now. They absolutely know what they have in their new defense coordinator.
Absolutely. And I mean, but Jim Schwartz, again, he's been around the NFL forever. He's been that guy that he plays that aggressive style of defense. I thought he did that very well for the Eagles. Even when he was head coach of the Lions, the brand of football, especially on defense that he brings, is very recognizable. And another thing Mike Tomlin said that I didn't actually clip up for the show, but he said, honestly, he's like, Jim Schwartz coming to the Browns was very much just kind of fitting to their strong points as far as how they're built and what they already do. He's just probably going to refine it. And Jim Schwartz, I think even at one point during himself, said, like, I'm not doing a whole lot of rewriting here. It's just kind of, fine tuning the points of this defense to play to their strengths a little bit more. So I think that that's certainly part of the factor there. We got to talk about the quarterbacks. Both quarterbacks didn't have their best days. While the Browns did win, I would say Deshaun Watson had his struggles. Kenny Pickett absolutely had his struggles. We'll get both of our perspectives on them and the upcoming battle in the trenches on both sides of the ball that is going to be also important for this game. We'll talk about all of that in a minute here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter and Jeff Lloyd talking Steelers and Browns here. But first, I want to remind you guys, this show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the most fun that you can have, winning 25 times, up to 25 times your money this football season. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and you can place your entry and win money right away. Prize Picks is the fun new daily fantasy game that everyone needs to start playing right now. If you're big into fantasy sports, it's easy. All you do is pick 2 to 6 players, and when you pick those players, just figure out their beat in fantasy. You look to see where their projections on certain stats are and just say more or less on those projections, and then you can start making money if you're right. And again, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. This week on Prize Picks, look at Justin Jefferson. Will he get over or under 100 yards? Lamar Jackson, will he throw more than a touchdown? You can simply combine those 2 right there, and if you guess the right numbers, you can win money on Prize Picks. Prize Picks offers weekly promotions that can lead up to big payouts like Taco Tuesday, where every Tuesday Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. Download the Prize Picks app today at prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all capital letters, all one word, for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100.
Well, with Watson, it was a tough start. Obviously, both quarterbacks have tough days. The weather, I don't think anybody was really expecting it to be raining in Cleveland. There was people who lived 3 minutes from the stadium who said it wasn't raining where they were, but it was raining over the stadium, so it seemed really weird. But look, you play the games, obviously. 16-29 is not exactly what the Browns expected. It was a slow start. There were some balls that were just drastically short. Late in the first half, though, he took a shot low, high at the same time. Kind of just seemed to maybe wake him up a little bit. And he's got real crisp after that, was able to get the touchdown run, which he audible to. He played a much stronger second half. He was a lot more accurate finding receivers open in the second half. The Browns don't need Deshaun necessarily to be a top 5 quarterback to be the quarterback that he was in 2020. This team is constructed very, very differently. It's a more balanced team. But yes, are they hoping for better than 16-129? Are they hoping for him to throw for 250 a week? That's kind of the ideal plan. But it's 1 week. If it goes on for a couple of weeks, maybe it becomes a little bit bigger of a talking point. But at this point, maybe you're just kind of splitting hairs essentially. Trying to find something to maybe say needs to improve when you win 24-3. But I think everybody's expectation, including Deshaun's, is that his play should improve.
No, I hear that entirely. And you're right. Like, the Steelers and the Browns are similar in this note. Neither team wants to have to throw the ball for 400 yards. They want to be able to run the ball, keep a balanced offense, have their quarterback make some plays, but don't rely on them to just air it out. And I think that's what the Steelers want to do. They didn't do that in this last game. Kenny Pickett took a lot of responsibility for himself after the game, and even we talked to him on Wednesday in the locker room. But there's a lot of focus on the Steelers as well. Like, Kenny Pickett knows that a lot of that was on him execution wise. It wasn't game planning. It wasn't they knew where to go. He just made mistakes in the moment, and that's something he has to clean up. He's a second-year quarterback. That was his first ever home opener or opener period that he's ever started in. So he's doing it. And this is going to be an interesting matchup because the Browns defense is coming off a dominant performance against Joe Burrow, one of the more prolific quarterbacks in the NFL. So for Kenny Pickett to bounce back in a week, I know he was playing a team that was the number one defense last year. This is another tall task ahead of him. So I think this is going to be a really interesting matchup for both quarterbacks to try to improve from their week one games. Jeff, thanks so much for doing the crossover Thursday with us here on the Locked On Podcast Network. He's Jeff Lloyd from Locked On Browns. I'm Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers. Check us out. We got Friday and Monday episodes that'll get you ready for this matchup. And remember, this is Monday Night Football, so Friday will get you ready for the weekend, but then we're back on Monday previewing Steelers-Browns one final time with our predictions. We'll see you then right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.